Hello everybody! Today I'm going to be filming a March reading wrap-up, which I'm really excited about because I didn't think I read that many books in March until I actually looked on my Goodreads and found that I did read a pretty good amount. I think I got like 6 or 7 books here, which I'm really proud of myself because for some reason March, I don't know if it just like felt like an eternity or exactly what happened, but regardless I was under the impression that I read like no books, and so the fact that I actually am like looking at a pile here makes me feel really happy and really satisfied. I started a new job, and so I think that March was just like really intense and kind of stressful with all that, and my mind was just elsewhere. So I'm happy that I was still able to get through a good amount. Also, I got new glasses and I got new hair. Also, props to any of you who know this band. We can be best friends. But let's just get on into it. I'm so happy because these glasses, I got like the anti-glare coating on them, and so it actually kind of like works, and I'm just like super thrilled that I can now film with glasses on and not feel like you guys can't see my eyeballs or anything. My cats are being crazy. Okay, enough rambling on. So the first book that I read in the month of March is Braced, and this is by Allison Gerber. My mom actually sent this to me. She's a librarian, and at her school, she teaches at an elementary school. She does the book fair each year, and this year she saw that this came out, and she thought it'd be perfect for me because it's a girl who goes through scoliosis during middle school, which is exactly the experience that I had. It isn't an own voices story because the author herself went through this, and she has scoliosis and did this whole, you know, bracing thing, and I absolutely loved this story. Of course, the actual writing style and everything is very, you know, kind of elementary, middle grade. It's not, you know, some like spectacularly profound novel by any means, but it's just so great to see a novel discussing something that I feel like is not talked about a lot. Scoliosis for me has always sort of been like an embarrassing thing to even bring up, and just kind of an annoying thing to bring up because a lot of people don't really have information on it. A lot of people know that it's kind of like this curvature of the spine, but people have a lot of like preconceived notions and a lot of stereotypes, and just not a whole lot of info on it and what it's actually like to go through it. So the fact that there's this novel out that really is true to what that experience is like, I think is not only nice for people that are going through it, especially at this age, but also for people who like don't really have a lot of background knowledge when it comes to scoliosis, or, you know, I just think it's cool that this is like a middle grade story that people, even if they aren't going through this, can read this and really gain a lot of perspective and understanding towards the whole thing. So I was super impressed with this. It was a wonderful book. I really love the main character, and for me it was just so true to my own experience and how I felt going through this, and so it was fantastic. I gave it 5 stars. Next I read Illuminae. This is by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I picked this up forever ago. Like, I bought this book back in like I think November or December, but I finally decided to read it now. My TBR shelf, by the way, it's getting out of control. I never used to be this way before I started watching BookTube. Before BookTube, I would have like 1 or 2 books. I literally have an entire like shelf on my bookshelf now of books I need to read. It's getting out of hand. So that was kind of what happened with this guy. I gave this 2 stars. I was really not in love with it. I do absolutely love like this mixed media element of it, the fact that it's just so like artistic and it's different and it's really fun to read because of that. But the actual story itself for me was just so confusing. And I read a lot of sci-fi, I read a lot of fantasy, and typically I feel pretty confident, like, you know, catching on. Even if we're thrown in the middle of the action, I can usually, you know, find my way through somewhere. But I was just so confused through this that I actually decided to get the audiobook. Heard a lot of people say that the audiobook to this is amazing. Totally is. It's narrated by like 12 different people, has like sound effects and everything. It's basically like a movie without like the picture, but it's just incredible. But even that, I found, even though it was really fun to listen to, I was still confused. Like, now that I finished the book, I do get the story, but it took me so long to kind of feel like I was caught up in understanding what was going on that at that point I really had no interest in the characters. I really didn't have an interest in the plot and what was going on, and I have absolutely zero interest in continuing on with the series. I really just kind of feel like this was a waste of my time, and I know a lot of you like this, so I'm sorry. I do not mean to offend you. I get it. Like, I get why you would really be into this, and I could see how, especially in book 2, because this how this left off, how it could really kind of expand to become like, you know, even better, but I just don't think it's for me. And even though I was so excited, it just kind of fell short for myself personally. Next, I picked up one of like my most anticipated reads for 2017. This is Jonah by Nikki Kelly. This is the final book in the Styklar saga. It's like a trilogy actually, but ever since I finished Gabriel, which was book number 2 last year, I have been like dying to get my hands on this. I was so excited for February of this year for this to be released. And I think part of my issue with this is that I kind of forgot some of the stuff that happens in the previous novels. I felt like I did catch on pretty quickly though, and a lot of things were kind of coming back, but something about this just was not engrossing to me as the first 2 were. I ended up giving this a 3-star rating because it was okay. I'm still happy I read it. Obviously, I wanted to read the conclusion and see how everything wrapped up. I feel like when it comes to a conclusion, you just really want those emotions, you want that fast-paced energy. You know, at this point, you've sort of invested a lot of time, and it's really important to me that like the final book be not necessarily the best, but I just really like it when the final book is just really interesting, and this just wasn't. To me, in this book, there really just wasn't a whole lot happening. The ending kind of felt like a little bit of a cop-out. Like, I get that it was supposed to be really emotional, but it didn't, for some reason, I just didn't feel those emotions the same way. I don't know, it's like this was written at like a completely different time. I feel like the other 2 for me just, I don't know, the energy was just so good. They flowed together so well, and the story was just so great. And then this one was just kind of like meh, you know? With the amount of stuff that happens in here, this easily could have been a duology, and the author just could have split this into 2, because this was just a very like slow-paced book. I still do really like the trilogy though. I mean, the first 2 were so amazing that I would recommend that you guys read those. However, if you're not like super interested in seeing how it ends, or if you just want to read like a spoiler review, that's what I would do, because this was just kind of, it was okay. Next, I read The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead, and this I gave a 4.5 star rating. I believe is a 4.5 star. This is a novel about the Underground Railroad, but it's retold as if the Underground Railroad was an actual railroad system. And so it's kind of like this really interesting take on historical fiction, because for the most part it is really historically accurate. It just kind of has this one futuristic element. And I was surprised in this book, and I put this in my review on Goodreads, that the Underground Railroad wasn't as central to the story as I thought it was going to be. This story more so explores the characters' lives while they're in slavery, and once they kind of escape but are still on the run. It explores a lot of side characters' lives, but the Underground Railroad system, in all actuality, isn't really as big of a deal in the story as I thought it was going to be. This is still a wonderfully written, amazing book, and it is 100% totally deserving of all of the praise it gets. It's incredible. The characters are very well fleshed out. The emotions are raw and real, and they hit you so hard, and this is totally one of those books that like everybody should read. But I think especially when it comes to kind of slavery historical fiction literature, it's been done so many times that you really need to find a way to stand out as an author if you're going to be writing about it. And while the premise of this I think definitely gave that to the reader because of, again, this futuristic railroad system, in execution, because that wasn't such a central point to the story, it kind of just felt like another good, you know, slavery historical fiction novel. Nothing, you know, bad to say about it. It was still, like I said, I gave it a very high rating because I thought it was great. It's a very artfully crafted, very well-researched novel. But at times, too, I remember the pacing kind of felt a bit weird. The writing style took me a little bit of time to kind of adjust to, and I've read this through other reviews, too. People kind of say that it's just, the way it's written, you kind of gotta go with it for a little bit, and then it sort of clicks. But at times, this novel, when I was reading it, I definitely started to get that kind of like laggy feeling of like, okay, this is a little bit dull right now. And it would eventually pick up. I was really expecting this to be like a 5-star, like blow me out of the water novel, and it was close. It was almost there, but again, it got a 4-star rating because it just wasn't quite. You will see a reoccurring theme through this one's wrap up is kind of disappointing novels. The next one I have is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Now, I read this in anticipation for the TV series that's coming up, which looks amazing, by the way. This is also a book that I've been wanting to read ever since I read Only Ever Yours by Louise O'Neill, because the stories are compared a lot, or at least Louise O'Neill's story gets compared a lot to this one. Because the storylines are very similar, the ideas and themes presented are very much so the same, but they're executed in completely different ways, and the setting I feel like is really different. And I think if you like one, you're gonna really like the other for sure. And so while I loved Only Ever Yours, I liked this. I don't know if part of it is because I read Only Ever Yours first and then read this, that this kind of let me down, but something about Only Ever Yours, I related so much to the main character and just, you know, a bunch of the different girls throughout that novel. And I think the more futuristic setting and the age group and everything, it just connected with me in a completely different way. I thought that the sexism was a lot more blatant. It seemed more real. For The Handmaid's Tale, you kind of get thrown right in without any sort of backstory, and you as the reader kind of have to start to piece it all together. And so again, for the first 100 pages of this book, I was just like, what the hell is going on? Which is really disappointing because it's only a 300-page novel. So for a third of the book, when you kind of feel like you don't have any sort of bearings and you're just really confused, it doesn't really make for the greatest reading experience. I also found, I don't know, I feel like the impact of this just didn't hit me as hard as Only Ever Yours did. Only Ever Yours changed my view of gender and sexism in society in a way that I've just never been the same since reading that. But for some reason with this, I just wasn't hit with the same amount of emotional impact. I think that it's definitely a very poignant and important story to read right now in our current political climate, and I think that it can serve as like a good warning sign. And there's a reason why this is climbing the charts, even though it's been published however many years ago. I think, again, partially anticipation for the TV series, and then partially because it's just important to read right now, and you can see like how even though this seems so unrealistic and this seems like so out there and so dystopian, after you get done reading this, you can really understand like how this would all happen. But for some reason, I just didn't walk away from this feeling a lot different or feeling really emotionally impacted. I definitely liked the story. I felt like while there definitely is a large amount of sexism in this book, it's just done in a completely different way than what I was expecting. I think that after reading Only Ever Yours and hearing so many people call it like, you know, The Handmaid's Tale 2.0 basically, I was really expecting the two stories to be really similar, and to me they're still very distinctly different stories. They're both I think that they're both really important to read, and I would definitely recommend that you do read this, especially if you've never read Only Ever Yours and this is your first time kind of getting into a story like this. This is definitely a great book to pick up. With the theme for this month, it seems just kind of disappointing, not exactly what I was expecting. Still a good book. And I remember this being really hard for me to rate and review because I think the themes and the ideas presented are definitely deserving of 5 stars, but the way that it's executed and written and the pacing and everything like that for myself just wasn't there. And then perhaps, I don't even know if this was like a disappointment, because in all honesty, I really wasn't expecting like a 5-star read out of this. This is Beautiful Disaster by Jamie McGuire. Okay, don't get me wrong, this was entertaining to read. It took me a while to finish because I had some other stuff going on at the time when I was reading this. But, you know, when I was reading it, it definitely is fast-paced. The story keeps moving, things keep changing, yada yada. But if you want like a class A example of like an awful relationship, an unhealthy relationship, a very emotionally abusive relationship, then read this. I do not at all appreciate or like how this insanely, like I said, emotionally abusive relationship is romanticized and portrayed through this novel. You have a love interest who is so controlling, so emotionally manipulative, and it just unbelievably like I said, borderline abusive, and the author paints it in a way that's a very like lighthearted, like ha ha ha, he just can't live without you, da da da. I should tell you what the story's about a little bit more. It's about a girl who goes off to college, meets the bad boy on campus who's kind of known for being like that guy that like gets with every girl or whatever, and they kind of become friends, and then through like a bet, it's like, honestly the premise is so dumb, but through this bet she ends up having to live with him for a month, and then of course like he starts to develop feelings for her. And his whole process of just like gallivanting his way through like, you know, the entire female body of this college campus just kind of like goes out the window, and now he just only wants to be with her, but she's conflicted because she, you know, he brings up stuff in her past, and there's this other boy who's more like, you know, the you know, type A, good boy, da, da. It's just, it's got a very stereotypical kind of premise to it, but if you read this, you will understand, or at least I hope you will understand, that this is not a good relationship, and that if I were in this situation, I would be like terrified, because the way that this love interest, again, emotionally manipulates this girl into certain feelings or into certain things, the way he controls, like, down to like what she's wearing and stuff, and maybe it's just that feminist in me, but I am just not okay with that. And so I had a really hard time getting through this. There's a lot of eye rolls in this story. There's a lot of just like, seriously, what the fuck? And so I gave it a 1 star. It just makes me really sad to think that there's people that will read this and will probably like aspire for this relationship, when I just, at least, and maybe this is a personal opinion thing, but I would just hope that you wouldn't want this, because I just don't think long term it's gonna work out too well for you. That's it. Hopefully this wasn't too long. I'm like looking at the time now and realize that this took me 20 minutes to film. But thank you all so much for watching this. Let me know if you read any really good books this month, or maybe what your favorite book that you read this month was down in the comments. I tell you this all the time, but truly I do get my absolute best book recommendations from you guys, and you are what contribute to like my endless growing TBR shelf that I have going on right now, which I kind of love hate you for. But other than that, I will see you all in the next one. Thanks again. Bye-bye.